In 1971, flying looked like this. Today, it looks like this. Everyone agrees it got worse, and almost everyone gets the reason backwards. Flying is roughly 45% cheaper than it was before 1978. That's not a coincidence. That's the cause. You didn't lose the legroom. You stopped paying for it. 3 things explain it: a law that made discounts illegal, a plane that flew half empty, and a ticket that got taken apart and sold back to you. It's 1971. A man walks up to a counter at JFK and buys a ticket to Los Angeles. He pays the equivalent of about $1,000 in today's money. He didn't shop around because there was nothing to shop for. Every airline charged the same price. Not by agreement, by law. Since 1938, a federal agency called the Civil Aeronautics Board decided which airlines could fly which routes and what they were allowed to charge. If an airline wanted to cut its fare, it had to ask permission. Permission was usually denied. Think about what that does to a business. You have competitors, you can't beat them on price, you can't even choose your routes. There's exactly one thing left to compete on: how nice the flight is. So that's what they did, and they did it with everything they had. Competing on comfort has a cost, and the cost was hiding in the seat next to you. Here's the number nobody believes. Before deregulation, a typical flight took off with about half its seats empty, not occasionally, routinely, and that wasn't a failure. It was the strategy. If you can't compete on price, you compete on convenience. More departures, more legroom, better food. More departures means more planes flying with fewer people on each one. Wider seats mean fewer seats to sell. Every one of those choices costs money, and the money has to come from somewhere. It came from the ticket. That empty seat beside you in 1971 wasn't a gift. It was a line item. You were buying 2 seats and sitting in one. This lasted 40 years. Then a senator held a hearing about it, and the whole thing came apart in 3 years. In 1975, Senator Ted Kennedy ran hearings on why flying cost what it cost. The answer that came back was uncomfortable. The agency created to protect passengers had spent decades protecting airlines from each other. Then, in 1977, an economist named Alfred Kahn took over that agency, a man who had spent his career studying regulation and concluded most of it was theater. Kahn's position was blunt. He believed the agency's real job was to work itself out of a job. And that's roughly what happened. On October 24, 1978, President Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act. Airlines could now fly where they wanted and charge what they wanted. The board that had set prices for 40 years was scheduled for deletion. Within a decade, it was gone. Prices fell almost immediately. So did some of the most famous airlines in the world. Competition arrived, and it was brutal. Braniff, a major carrier famous for painting its planes in bright colors, expanded aggressively into the new open routes and collapsed in 1982, the first big casualty of the new era. Eastern Airlines, gone. Pan Am, the airline that had invented international travel for Americans, filed for bankruptcy in January 1991 and shut down that December, putting around 7,500 people out of work. Meanwhile, the survivors rebuilt the map. Instead of flying everywhere to everywhere, they funneled passengers through a few giant hubs, the hub and spoke system. It's why you connect through Atlanta or Dallas to get somewhere neither of you lives. It's also brutally efficient. Fill the plane, fly it more, spread the cost over more passengers, and it worked. Planes went from half empty to over 80% full, and fares kept falling. Cheaper flights, fuller planes. So, where did the comfort actually go? It didn't vanish, it got itemized. Once airlines could compete on price, the winner was whoever showed the lowest number on the screen. And the fastest way to show a lower number is to sell less for it. So, the ticket came apart. The bag became a fee. The seat you choose became a fee. Boarding earlier, more legroom, the carry-on itself, fees. In 2016, airlines worldwide made about $67 billion from these extras. Last year, worldwide, it was over 150 billion. And here's the part that makes the whole story click. Over that same stretch, passengers pay roughly 40% less to fly. Both things are true. The ticket didn't get more expensive with tricks on top. It got much cheaper, and then the parts you used to get automatically were put back on the shelf with price tags. The seats moved too. Economy pitch went from about 35 inches in the 70s to about 31 today, 4 inches. That's the legroom. That's the whole complaint. And it's the price of the seat nobody else has to buy for you anymore. So who actually won? Not who you'd think. Before 1978, flying was a product for people who could afford $1,000 to cross the country. It was spacious, civilized, and rationed by price. Today it's cramped, itemized, and available to almost anyone. A bus with wings. And that is exactly what most people voted for with their money, every time they clicked the cheapest fare. The nostalgia is real. But the 1971 cabin wasn't better run. It was better funded by you, whether you wanted it or not. There is a real catch, and it's not the legroom. 4 U.S. carriers now control most of the domestic market, and a market that consolidated can raise prices again. The empty seat beside you is gone for good. Whether the cheap ticket stays is a different question, and that one isn't settled.